Compare and contrast the two graphs below. How are they alike? How are they different? What types of data do they each represent? In this lesson, you will extend your thinking about graphing data by constructing frequency tables and histograms. Let's review. A bar graph is a visual display of data that falls into categories. Here's the example from the top. Bar graphs are used to compare data. Here we can compare how many students are voting for soccer, hockey, baseball, and basketball, and we can see that hockey seems to be the most favorite sport. A histogram shows how many data values fall into a certain numeric interval. The number of data items in an interval is the frequency. The width of the bar represents the interval, while the height indicates the number of data items or frequency in that interval. Unlike a bar graph, data in a histogram are displayed in a continuous manner, meaning the bars are connected, not spaced apart. Now let's talk about a common mistake. When the first interval does not start at 0, you cannot start the first bar at the origin. So let's take a look at this histogram. Was it graphed correctly? I see the first interval is showing 1 to 5 hours. Does that interval start at 0? Since it doesn't, the first bar should not be graphed at the origin. That's incorrect. The bars in the histogram above should all be moved over one space to the right, creating a break in the x-axis. Let's do the guided practice together. The following set of data represents the scores on a mathematics quiz. Complete the frequency table below and, on the accompanying grid, draw and label a frequency histogram of these scores. So looking at the table, I see I'm given 5 intervals, 50 to 59, all the way up to 90 to 99. So I need to go through my list of quiz scores and mark a tally mark every time I see a new score. The first score I see is 58. So that's going to go in my 50 to 59 interval, so I'll put a tally mark there. 79 goes from 70 to 79. 81, 99, 68, 92, 76, 84, 53, 57, 81, 91, 77, 50, 65, 57. Now when I get to 57, I see I already have 4 tally marks, so the 5th tally mark looks like that. Or you can go in the opposite direction. 51, that adds a 6th tally mark. 72, 84, 89, so I'm going to need to cross out the 4 again with the 5th. Once I have all of my tally marks, now I can count those tally marks to create my frequency. Frequency is just the number of times a number in that interval occurred. So I had 6 in the first interval, 2 in the second, followed by 4, 5, and 3. Now that my frequency table has been completed, I can now construct my frequency histogram. It says draw and label. So the first thing I want to do is label. And looking down at my x-axis, I know that my x-axis has to be the intervals. So the intervals from 50 to 59 all the way up to 90 to 99 have to be written there. I'm not going to label it interval, I'm going to label it quiz scores because that's really what those numbers represent. Then along my y-axis, that's the frequency. Well, again, I'm not going to label it frequency. What does frequency mean in this case? It's the number of scores. So labeling is one part. Now we also have to decide on an interval to use. to space out the grid. So the first thing I'll look at is my frequencies. I know I can see here that my highest frequency is 6, so going along the y-axis, I need to get up to 6. I don't want to just go up 1 every time because that's going to just give me a very small histogram. I want it to be a little larger. I want to fill up at least 50% of the space provided to me in the grid. So if I start at 0 at the origin, rather than going up 1 every time, I'm going to go up 2 to make a 1. So you'll see that looks like that. So I'm using every other grid line instead of every grid line. And my first mark, I'm going to call that a 1, followed by 2, all the way up to 6. Just like that. I'm done with my frequency. I'm going to move on to my intervals now. So my intervals go from 50 to 59 to 90 to 99. I know I have 5 intervals, and I need to spread them apart as well. I don't want really, really thin bars. I want to, again, use as much space as I can. But remember, when the first interval does not start at 0, you cannot start the first bar at the origin. So my first notch will start at the first grid line over from the 0. So that's where my first bar will start, and I'm going to end it, let's go 3 units over. So that's the width of my first bar. Since I'm choosing a width of 3, every single bar needs to have a width of 3. So I go over 3 again, put a notch, over 3 again, notch, over 3 again, and over 3 again. Those are my 5 bars. When I label, I'm not labeling the notches like I labeled on the y-axis. In this case, I'm labeling the space in between the notches because it's the entire space that represents the bar. So the 50 to 59 goes in between, 60 to 69, and so on. And I use a diagonal here just because it would be hard to squeeze it all in, but if you want to write your numbers horizontally, that's fine too. For the first interval, the 50 to 59, I know I have a frequency of 6, so that means my first bar is going to go up to 6, and it'll look like that. Moving on, the 60 to 69 has a frequency of 2, so it's going to be a shorter bar. They are going to be connected, so the bar will extend from the vertical line that's already there. 70 to 79 has a height of 4, so we're going to go up to 4. 80 to 89, well, I can't see it, so let's move that. So 80 to 89 has a height of 5, and 90 to 99 has a height of 3. We're almost done. What are we still missing from our histogram? If you said a title, you're right. Let's call it the math quiz. And we're done. We just created a histogram together. So now let's continue answering the questions. Which interval contains the upper quartile? Rather than making a list of all the data and putting in order from least to greatest, we can actually use the histogram here to help us. All it's asking for is which interval contains the upper quartile. It's not asking for the specific value. So I'm going to create this list. I won't read it to you, but I will tell you that there are 6 ones. Those 6 ones represent the 6 scores in the first interval. The 2 twos represent the 2 scores in the second interval. Then we see 4 threes because there are 4 scores in the third interval. There's 5 fours for the 5 scores in the fourth interval, and of course 3 fives for the 3 scores in the fifth interval. I think it's easier to do this rather than listing out all the numbers from least to greatest. We can see them here, least to greatest, and all that matters is what interval it's in. Is it in the first, second, third, fourth, or fifth interval? So now we can do the cross out method. We're going to cross out the first and the last until we get to the middle. And in this case, the middle is in between the 2 threes. That would give us the median. Unfortunately, we need to find the upper quartiles, so we need to focus on the second half of the data and then cross out in the other direction, again, the first and the last. So we'll cross out the 3 with the 5 and then work our way inward, and we see the 4s. So we know our upper quartile will be in between the two 4s, but it doesn't matter what value that is. All that matters is that it's in the 4th interval, which will say it's in the 80 to 89 interval. Next, is it possible to find the average score from the histogram? Justify your reasoning. What do you think? Since the histogram does not display the exact scores on the quiz, it is impossible to find the average score from the histogram alone. We would need more information. Now it's time for you to try it on your own. The following data consists of the weights in pounds of 16 high school students. Using these data, complete the frequency table below and then construct a frequency histogram on the accompanying grid. Pause the video, and when you're ready to check your answer, you can press play. Good luck! Are you ready to check your answer? So make sure you tallied all of the pounds correctly. There should be 4 in the first interval, 5 in the second, 3 in the third, and 4 in the fourth. You have to make sure you have your x-axis labeled, your y-axis labeled, and of course a title. If you spaced out your intervals on the y-axis more than I did, that's fine. And if your bars are a different width, that's okay. In this lesson, you have extended your thinking about graphing data by constructing frequency tables and histograms. Good job. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.